Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The stalemate over President Trump's upcoming Senate trial is deepening this morning. Democrats are seizing on newly released emails to renew their calls for testimony from key administration officials. Those emails show that the White House Budget Office ordered a freeze of security aid for Ukraine just 90 minutes after Mr. Trump spoke to Ukraine's president in July. Joining us now, we have CNN Justice correspondent Laura Jarrett and CNN political commentator Joe Lockhart. He was President Clinton's press secretary during impeachment. Well, these are interesting. These add a new wrinkle to what we've already known. So here's the timeline. At 9:03 a.m., President Trump had the call, the beginning of the call with Zelensky. It wrapped up a half an hour later. An hour and a half later, the White House Budget Office orders the hold on Ukraine aid. September 9th, Congress gets notified about the whistleblower complaint. September 11th, the aid is released. And so, Laura, as John was pointing out during the break, it's that President Trump asked Zelensky for this favor, applied pressure that he'd sure like this favor done. It would really help. And then it was top of mind and said, while we're at it, let's just freeze the aid till the favor's done.
I think the biggest issue in this entire impeachment inquiry has been intent. And that's what this email, I think, speaks to, is what was the president's intent? And if it was a perfect call, as he used to say, then why is the OMB telling the Pentagon an hour and a half later, keep this closely held, it's a sensitive nature, and we already know that the call transcript, White House aides were scurrying around trying to put it in some secret server. And so if all of this was on the up and up, why the necessary secrecy?
And let's pull that quote up from the emails, because I think it's significant. It says, given the sensitive nature of this request, I appreciate you keeping that information closely held to those who need to know to execute direction. So, Joe Lockhart, you've worked in the White House. What does that kind of an email tell you? Is this just a normal CYA, or is this a sign of more nefarious intent, as Laura suggests?
Well, I think to answer Laura's question, if this was all on the up and up, guess what? It all wasn't on the up and up. I don't even think you need to have worked in the White House. That's an extraordinary communication, to be telling other people in writing, hold up, because that's a little CYA from the person in the OMB, because, normally you'd call someone and say, hey, this is, but he was putting it down there to say, this isn't me. I mean, this is, if you get into Adam Schiff's head and you think, this is what I think the documents would say if they'd actually give them to me, this is even better than what he thought. This is just direct communication saying that going to intent, we are going to squeeze them, and we're going to cover up the fact that we're going to squeeze them. And it will just increase the appetite for more information, and more importantly, increase the pressure on a handful of Republican senators to have to get to the truth in the Senate with either documents or witnesses or something more than what they have now.
Well, I mean, by the way, these emails, we only know about them because of a Freedom of Information request. So the public and journalists can put in these Freedom of Information Act requests, thank goodness. And so we wouldn't have known about these, but they're heavily redacted. And so here's another one. This is from the day that the aid was released. Why that day, people have wondered. Well, Michael Duffy, who of course is the one who wrote that it had to be covered up, the sensitive nature is what he first wrote. He writes to the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, Elaine, I will be issuing an apportionment this evening to immediately release all the aid funds for obligation. I will alert you as soon as I have signed the apportionment. Thank you. Elaine, this deputy undersecretary, says, copy. What happened? Thanks. He responds, and it's redacted. So we don't know what he says, but then he says, still waiting for my staff to send me apportionment, hoping to sign tonight. Glad to have this behind us. I mean,
absolutely. And we already know from previous emails that there were at least two officials in OMB who were so concerned about this freeze that they said, I want out of here. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And he's saying, I'm glad this is behind me. I mean, come on.
And also, I mean, the reason that it would be great to have witnesses at the trial is because then Michael Duffy could answer, what did you redact here? When she said, what happened? What was your answer?
And he also says, based on the guidance that I've received,
and who gave
you that guidance and when, and what did they tell you about why it was being frozen?
Was it the acting chief of staff, Mulvaney, who also oversees OMB? Joe, quickly before we go, Nancy Pelosi is withholding these impeachment declarations right now. What is her leverage over the Senate?
Well, let's put it this way. She started with no leverage, and she created out of nothing limited leverage. Will she be able to withhold these things indefinitely? No, of course not. But was she able to set the narrative for the next 2 weeks with this and put more pressure on Republican senators as they go home for the Christmas break? Absolutely. So, I mean, it's kind of a silly debate that some people are having that they'll never go over. They will go over. My guess is they'll go over in mid to late January. But she has created an atmosphere where it's more likely rather than less likely that we're going to see some witnesses.
It is Tuesday, the 24th of December of 2019. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special on this fine Christmas Eve morning. It's Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a special daily special since it is Christmas Eve. Well, here we are in the mothership. I should let you or remind you that this is our last show for the week. I may be back in time on Friday for a show, but I'm not quite sure. We'll have to leave it up to weather. And I may just decide to spend a little bit more time with my grandkids. So beware. If we don't catch up with you at the end of the week, we certainly will be back on Monday. A mix of regular and special holiday programming is in the offing. Do not fret. Daily Co's Radio, K-Girl in the Morning, will be in its regular spot. He has a reprise from last year set up for Christmas Day. And then David will be live on Thursday and Friday. So we've set up the station as a robot station in my absence. And hopefully the robot will continue having power. There's always the risk. I should warn folks. There's always the risk that we might have a power pop here. And if that's the case, since I have battery expansion in the MacBook, it doesn't really run on a battery anymore, and it will shut off. And if I can get someone over here to reboot the Mac and get the broadcaster back up, otherwise, we might be in trouble. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, that it will run as it's run before when I've had to put it into a robot station. So we will see. I'll be monitoring from afar, and I will be on social media. So if anything happens, let me know, and I'll try to get a relative over here. My mother, my 82, soon-to-be 83-year-old mom, is quite incapable of performing that task if we do have a power pop. So I'll need to find someone else. Maybe my sister. My sister knows how to do it. Okay, well, I hope that you all have some good holidays in whatever way that you are celebrating. We got quite a big news day today. It being news every day because of the Trump administration. I mean, he doesn't take Christmas off. I mean, he doesn't take Christmas off from being, pretty much a dictator, a pompous ass. No, that's a full-time job for that guy. So we will always have quite a bit of news in the offing. We might get a Christmas surprise. Apparently, the North Koreans have an intercontinental ballistic missile that can get to the United States, apparently. And this is after, they had such good talks and exchanged such lovely love letters with each other. Can you imagine if Obama, I know this is not a really good mental exercise anymore, because anything that Obama would have done would be the exact opposite of what Trump does, except Obama would be threatened with impeachment over it. Exactly. They threatened, this is not a joke. There was actually a group of senators who wanted to impeach Obama over his tan suit because it was disrespectful to the office of the United States. Jesus Christ. But we can't impeach this guy for pretty much being a Russian marionette. No puppet, no puppet. Trump is a marionette. And the Trump cult continues to be in abject denial, to the point where now they're making up memes about Nancy being drunk and falling over drunk. Gee. When it's Trump that's like in the vast mental decline, anything that they complain about, they are projecting. Let's remember that. You don't F with Nancy. You don't. She knows exactly what she's doing, and she has the votes. She's the best vote counter in the history of the United States. Let's be clear about that. And you know what? Even the people who said that they wanted to toss her out of the speakership are now coming publicly and saying, geez, boy, good thing she's there. Yeah, that's what we all said when you were trying to kick her out. Because we needed some new blood, some new thinking. New thinking doesn't necessarily mean it's good thinking. Let's be clear about that. Well, why don't we get into what we have offered here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Of course, at the top, boy, good thing we still have a Freedom of Information Act. I expect that to be written out by executive order real soon anyway. But if not for that, we would not be aware of these newly released Ukraine aid emails that have turned out to be more damning than even Schiff imagined. Really. So this impeachment investigation continues, and it looks like there may be more articles of impeachment in the offing. Yes, there could be, especially when we have all this new evidence coming to the fore. Indeed. On the rest of the menu, 3 U.S. senators demanded that the GAO, that's the Government Accounting Office, investigate the coal tax credit program. Yeah, apparently when they have this program in which to burn off the bad parts of coal, all the after gases, and they want to burn all those off, and they get a tax credit for that. Well, it turns out it's spewing more mercury and other toxic chemicals into the atmosphere instead. Oops! Homeland Security whitewashed any claims of wrongdoing in the deaths of 2 migrant kids they refused to care for. Well, they can't be held culpable. They didn't treat them. And the House Judiciary Committee argued in an appeals court that McGahn's testimony is still critical to its ongoing impeachment investigation. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table, where the former VP of China's state-run chemical and oil firm was sentenced to 11.5 years for taking bribes. Wow. In China, you can't bribe people. And Trump wants to make it part of a business model for American diplomacy. Indeed. And Nepal has detained 122 Chinese nationals for cybercrime and bank fraud. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link. Of course, it is monitored by Kelly Lincoln because she does that and so much more, and we thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page from that chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page. And all kidding aside, if you could please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, how about if you bought us an espresso type coffee drink once a month and sent those proceeds to us? I can affirm that we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, because we've been doing it for over 8 years now of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio because of you. Though the bulk of what we do and how we pay for this powerhouse of resistance is really out of our own wallets, as Tom says, we would be unable to do it without you because you are our biggest contributor. And I don't mean big by size, but by, well, actually the size of your heart. Thank you so much for your great generosity. And we have bills and machinery to purchase, bills to pay, machinery to purchase, and your generosity is allowing us to do that. So we'll be making some transitions to newish machinery, probably beginning at the middle of the month after the new year. Tom and I have identified a MacBook, or a couple that we were going to try to choose from, if they're still available. And then I'm going to try to get this mini Mac back to life, since it turned into a brick. After only having it for a few months, by the way, I stupidly did an OS, operating system update, that it asked, do you want to do this? And I said, okay. Oops. It's a brick. It holds up some CDs and books right now. Holds them up from falling over. So hopefully I can get that reincarnated. They don't really have Genius bars here in the third world of Oregon. At least in the third world part of Oregon that I reside in. But there are some tech types here that may be able to resurrect it. I sure hope so. Because I would much rather pay for that than have to get another PC, which is okay. This Dell that we've had here for over 4 years has been working pretty good, but we need to let it not work as hard because it's on Windows 7. And that operating system is no longer going to be supported beginning on the 20th of next month. Nice. Okay, well, so we very much thank you for your generosity in allowing us to continue our civic obligation and duty that we gladly embrace because we are Resistance Radio. And it's because of your generosity that we continue to be so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so very simple. You just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and so much more. And we thank Tom for all of that. I, of course, take care of @Justice Putnam, which is a pretty darn good place to follow me at. And that's because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I link that up on social media, to my accounts. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, I post there at Cookbook West, pretty much just show notes and the links diary. But hey, it's a pretty page nonetheless. And you can also pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Mixed in with all the rest of us. And there's billions and more. It's all getting to be more. All right. Remember when they used to talk about, numbers that were just beyond our comprehension and it would be called astronomical numbers? Apparently the national debt now is more than the stars that we can count in the sky. So I think maybe if they're going to start talking about numbers that is incomprehensible for our pea brains to comprehend, they should call them banking numbers. Indeed. Merry Christmas. Yeah. And also happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, and really I hope your holidays are one of joy and love and sharing, and more joy, love, and sharing, indeed. Okay, we better get into this first offering here on the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and Tim McLaughlin of Reuters brings us this first offering. 3 U.S. Democratic senators have asked the investigative arm of Congress to evaluate a $1 billion a year subsidy for burning chemically treated refined coal, after research has shown that some power plants using the fuel produced surged the amounts of mercury and smog instead of cutting pollution. Wow. Merely Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, as well as Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown, Massachusetts and Ohio, respectively, requested the Government Accountability Office, affectionately known as the GAO, to investigate the tax credit program for refined coal. The request for an investigation comes after a Reuters special report in December of 2018 revealed that power plants burning refined coal pumped out more smog, not less. After the Reuters report, a study by independent nonprofit Resources for the Future found that power plants using refined coal were not reducing mercury, nitrogen oxide, or sulfur dioxide pollution to levels required by the tax credit program. This is clean coal. It's clean. And it's pumping out more smog than from before. Well, they always lie. If they say it's clean, it must not be. Those pollutants rose sharply at some power plants after they began burning refined coal. Others showed reductions, but not enough to meet the requirements for taxpayer subsidies. This raises questions about the extent to which the use of refined coal is actually achieving the emissions reductions required to claim the refined coal production tax credit. Well, you do know that we are a planet. We're a world. And we spew chemicals and gases. We just spew and spew and spew. And, we're so small in the universe that even though we spew all these chemicals, it's not really that much of a drop in the whole of the universe now, is it? And so we better continue polluting our atmosphere with sulfur dioxide and mercury, because windmills kill birds. This next offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder, Tuesday's Christmas Eve special, is brought to us by anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press. The Department of Homeland Security's internal watchdog found no wrongdoing or misconduct by immigration officials in the deaths of 2 migrant children last December. The Inspector General for DHS released 2 brief statements on the deaths of Jacqueline Amie Rosemary Calmaquin, who died on December 8th of 2018 at the age of 7, and Felipe Gomez Alonzo, who died this day, December 24th, 2018, at the age of 8. Their deaths ushered in a growing border crisis that caught immigration officials unprepared to manage a crush of Central American families seeking asylum in the U.S. and raised questions on medical care and treatment. Border crossings have since declined in recent months following major crackdowns. Now, this also comes on the heels of the President of the United States, one impeached Donald John Trump, who called doctors wanting to treat refugee children for medical conditions, and to inoculate them, he called them radical leftist doctors for simply wanting to help people. This man is a monster. He is a ghoul. And I'm telling you, impeachment's not good enough. And a trial by a panel or tribunal in Nuremberg, Pennsylvania is not enough. And a time in Leavenworth will still not be enough. And I'm telling you, even going to The Hague, standing trial there, convicted and put in some sort of cell with where Milosevic was, will still not be enough. Both children made their way over the U.S.-Mexico border with a parent. Jacqueline was part of a large group that crossed in an extremely remote location, and it took hours for her to be transported to a hospital. Some 7 hours later, she was put on a bus to the nearest Border Patrol station, but soon began vomiting. By the end of the 2-hour drive, she had stopped breathing, and she was dead. Lawmakers and immigrant advocates questioned the care she received and criticized the immigration agency's then leader, Kevin McClellan, for not alerting lawmakers to the death during his testimony before a congressional committee. Customs and Border Protection said that the girl initially appeared to be healthy and that an interview raised no signs of trouble because they don't care. They are not doctors, and they prevent doctors from providing care who might be able to tell them what is up. Because they don't want to know, because cruelty is the point. The watchdog said it had conducted a detailed investigation in coordination with the local medical examiner's office, and the girl died from strep. Well, thanks. Philippe was taken with his father to a hospital in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where he was diagnosed with a common cold. He was released before 3 p.m. About 90 minutes later, after he had been found to have a fever of 103 degrees, he was prescribed some amoxicillin and ibuprofen and taken with his father to a holding facility at a highway checkpoint. That's nice care, isn't it? At about 7 p.m., agents helped clean up the boy's vomit, but by 10, the boy appeared lethargic and nauseous again, the agency said, and agents decided to have him taken to the hospital, and the boy died shortly before midnight. Philippe and his father were detained by Customs Border Protection for about a week and sent to various facilities because of overcrowding. An unusually long period in custody at the time, but something that later became more common as the agency struggled with a growing number of migrants detained. And I should add, it's not just Trump, where it's not good enough just to have him impeached. And all that followed in my list. But one Stephen Miller, the Santa Monica Goebbels, the architect of this regime. The Hague will certainly not be enough. One of the reasons that I put myself in a figurative bubble when I'm doing the show, once I have the show curated, it's really hard to avoid getting new information, and then a news story will appear that you just feel that it has to be included. But if that's the case, I would never have a show. So I try to keep it somewhat curated, so there's a little bit of order here. But I made the bad mistake during the break of looking at my Twitter feed, and something caught my eye. Feliz Navidad is trending. Happy Hanukkah is trending. Merry Christmas Eve is trending. Happy Kwanzaa is trending. And women are trash is trending. I don't know. I don't know if that's supposed to be sort of like embracing it, to so that women have more power. Yeah, I'm a trashy woman, but women are trash on Christmas Eve. Okay, that's something that one wouldn't expect before Trump. Now it just seems like, yeah, so. Our final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes by out of Reuters by Jan Wolf. A House of Representatives panel told an appeals court yesterday, Monday, that despite having already voted to impeach Donald Trump, lawmakers still have an urgent need for testimony from former White House counsel Don McGahn. Well, of course. And you know what else? Those emails that the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, released came from a FOIA request. It wasn't because of a whistleblower. We still have the mechanisms of government in which to be able to discern some of the truth. I should add that those emails were heavily redacted, probably illegally. But what they didn't redact tells such a big story that once we find out what the unredacted portion said, we can fill it in and color it out now, can't we? McGahn's testimony is critical both to a Senate trial and to the committee's ongoing impeachment investigations to determine whether additional presidential misconduct warrants further action by the committee, the committee said. The Democratic-led House impeached Trump last week on 2 charges over his pressuring Ukraine to announce an investigation of former Vice President Joe Biden and Biden's son. And, of course, Biden is a potential Democratic candidate to run against Republican Trump in November of 2020 election. Trump only chose Biden because Biden was kicking his ass way back in July. But Trump knows so little about politics. He knows so little about American civics. Anything I believe that he knows about civics at this point has been force-fed to him by Vlad and Vlad's handlers. All that Vlad has to do is tell Trump this is the truth, and Trump will believe it. Trump is not a puppet, he's a marionette. And we have to remember that. But because he knows so little, because Joe Biden was kicking his ass in July doesn't mean diddly what's going to happen next year. I got to tell you, people in the know way back didn't think Joe Biden, maybe, we like Joe, but still. I think it's time for Kamala to consider getting back in the race as far as I'm concerned. And there's precedent, somewhat. Robert F. Kennedy, before he was assassinated for being the front runner in 1968, was a late entry, and so late it was right before the California primary, which was one of the last primaries in the nation at the time. That's how close to the election. We're talking 6 months. Might have only been 5. It was on June 4th. June, July, August, September, October, November. Yeah, almost 6 months. Still. So Kamala can get back in the race as far as I'm concerned, because I like Amy Klobuchar. I do. I like Liz. I do. Some of the others, I don't know. Corey's okay. But I like Kamala. She really was the only one that energized the Democratic base. Even the ones who said she's a cop. Trump was charged with abuse of power and obstructing Congress, the Congress's investigation, but said he did nothing wrong because he has an Article 2. There is little chance Trump will be convicted and removed from office through a trial in the Republican-led Senate because Mitch McConnell says this is a graveyard where democracy comes to die. And if impeachment is part of democracy, it's going to have a stake driven through its heart because it is a bloodsucker. Democracy is the bloodsucker to power. We don't want to give it up. The committee has been litigating since August in hopes of securing McGahn's testimony, which could bolster its case that Trump has improperly obstructed investigations into his presidency. All you have to do is look at what he's done in real time from open source material even. I just think that it's rich. The David Show from this time last year, December 24th, was when we had a government shutdown. If that's not the epitome of obstruction, we better get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world. And we are going to finish up with those stories that we have curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Clint Fox. It's probably a good thing that somebody made the movie Richard Jewell. To recap from 1996, Jewell was the security guard at the Atlanta Olympics who took action after noticing what turned out to be a deadly bomb. Jewell's actions likely saved scores of lives, yet within a couple of weeks, he had become the FBI's main suspect as the bomber. So enter award-winning director Clint Eastwood to tackle Jewell's story for the big screen, following several credible print efforts. Eastwood succeeds with his usual meticulous direction from a Billy Ray screenplay and nuanced performances from Olivia Wilde and John Hamm as the reporter-FBI duo from whom the Jewell as suspect angle leaked, from Sam Rockwell and Kathy Bates as Jewell's lawyer and mom, respectively, and especially from Paul Walker Hauser. Hauser, who you might remember as the low-rent bad guy from I, Tonya, is Jewell, and he does a splendid job bringing dimension to a less-than-likable and easily caricatured cop wannabe type. The film is moving in many ways, and had its director not had a conversation with an empty chair at a Republican convention or compared zoning laws to Nazism when he was a mayor, maybe some of the doubts people are having with it would not exist. But what Eastwood captures in the touching relationship between Jewell and his mom, and even with his lawyer, he squanders in a cartoonish and partisan portrayal of the press and FBI, which posits a speculative theory as fact, exactly what he's accusing those institutions of doing. Both entities get things wrong all the time, of course, but it's not the grand conspiracy theory against ordinary white men for which Eastwood is searching. Richard Jewell is worth a watch. Just know your storyteller before buying the ticket. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Go snorkeling in a lot of places and you'll find coral. But on Israel's Mediterranean coast,
I think it's the only place in the world that you can find whole prehistoric villages submerged under the sea.
Ehud Galili is an underwater archaeologist at the University of Haifa. He says one submerged village, called Tel Hrez, sits 5 to 10 feet under the water. The community was populated some 7,000 years ago. There, the archaeologists have found pottery and flint, human skeletons, the remains of deer, cows, pigs, and dogs, and hundreds of olive pits, probably the remains of olive oil production. And the researchers also found a 300-foot-long stretch of huge boulders, a wall. After ruling out possible other uses for the wall, like defense against enemies or corralling animals, the scientists determined that the formation was actually an ancient seawall, the oldest known example in the world. The results are in the journal PLOS ONE. The boulders that kept the waters of the Mediterranean from flooding the village came from riverbeds a mile or two away, and the researchers say it would have taken multiple people or strong beasts of burden to move them into place, suggesting that constructing the wall was a well-organized community effort. But eventually, the sea beat the barrier.
Little by little, sea level continued to rise, and then it became no more effective. And at some point, the cost of continuing to struggle with the sea was too high economically, and they made a decision to abandon the village.
Of course, our technology is far more advanced than what they had 7 millennia ago. But this sunken seawall is still a warning of what can happen when humans battle rising seas. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm dreaming of a white non-sectarian, non-denominational, non-government sponsored late December holiday. Hey, honey, come quick. It's the ACLU Carolers.
I'm singer-songwriter Patty Larkin, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
'Tis the season, the silly season, the time of year when some claim that the ACLU is against Christmas because we and other groups that believe in religious freedom fight to maintain the First Amendment guarantee of a wall of separation between church and state. Separation of church and state means that religious symbols, including a creche, that's a structure depicting baby Jesus in the manger, can be displayed on private property, but that public property is reserved for all the people and not one specific religion. It is the First Amendment's Establishment Clause that prohibits the government from endorsing, favoring, supporting, or trying to establish a national religion. The other half of the guarantee of religious freedom in America is the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause. The Free Exercise Clause guarantees the right to observe and celebrate Christmas and freely exercise religious beliefs and to sing or not sing. So may your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That tragic Christmas Eve came to be known as the Italian Hall disaster in Calumet, Michigan. A Christmas party was being held for children of striking copper miners. The strike had begun that July. Miners wanted the 8-hour day and better wages and conditions. They also wanted recognition of the Western Federation of Miners as their union. The mine owners stood staunchly against this demand. They formed a citizens' alliance to antagonize and harass labor. The strike was long and bitter. The union's women's auxiliary decided to hold a benefit party for the strikers' children. They put on their party in the upstairs of the Italian Hall. Between 300 and 400 children attended. As the program was going on, someone opened the door at the bottom of the stairs and shouted, "Fire!" Many children and adults attending the party panicked. They rushed downstairs to escape the building, but the door opened in, and the crush of bodies made it impossible to get out. More and more children came down the stairs, crushing those below. More than 70 people died. 60 were children. There was no fire. No one could ever prove who started the panic, but many believe it was strikebreakers hired by the mine managers. Witnesses claimed that the person who instigated the disaster was wearing a Citizens Alliance button on his coat. The next day on Christmas, a Finnish workers' newspaper reported the grim story. The scene was a horrible one and will never be effaced from the minds of those who witnessed the terrible tragedy. Woody Guthrie memorialized the deaths in his song, The 1913 Massacre.
Take a trip with me in 1913. to Calumet, Michigan in the copper country. I'll take you to a place called Italian Hall.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi on Monday reiterated that she can't select impeachment managers until she knows, quote, what sort of trial the Senate will conduct. Across the aisle, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called her position, quote, absurd. After the House of Representatives last week passed 2 articles of impeachment charging Trump with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, the rules of the Senate's trial need to be agreed upon before it can move forward. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has called for White House witnesses, like Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, at the trial. McConnell said Monday Republicans haven't ruled out witnesses, but he indicated the current impasse wouldn't be resolved until after the holidays. So Congress might be on recess, but impeachment work is continuing behind the scenes. Lawyers for the House Judiciary Committee floated the idea that the panel could take up additional articles of impeachment against Trump, this according to a document filed in a federal appeals court on Monday. Urging the court to compel former White House counsel Don McGahn to testify, the committee's lawyers said that his testimony could lead to more revelations about the president's behavior. Quote, if McGahn's testimony produces new evidence supporting the conclusion that President Trump committed impeachable offenses that are not covered by the articles approved by the House, the committee will proceed accordingly, including, if necessary, by considering whether to recommend new articles of impeachment. CNN has new reporting about Rudy Giuliani's efforts to dig up dirt on Trump's political rivals. When his associates Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman traveled to Ukraine last winter to gather documents on Joe Biden and his son Hunter, they were accompanied by a former pro golfer named David Correa. Sources and documents obtained by CNN show the role that Correa had in helping them try to make the effort pay off in lucrative business deals. All 3 men were indicted in October for illegally funneling foreign money into Republican political circles. But so far, attention has focused mainly on Parnas and Fruman and little on the former golfer David Correa. There's a big divide in the evangelical community over its support for Donald Trump. In the wake of last week's editorial in Christianity Today calling for the president to be removed from office, the Christian Post published its own editorial supporting the president. That prompted Nap Nasworth, politics editor at the Christian Post, to resign. He tweeted, quote, today, rather abruptly, I was forced to make the difficult choice to leave the Christian Post. They decided to publish an editorial that positions them on Team Trump. I can't be an editor for a publication with that editorial voice. So the CEO of Boeing, Dennis Muhlenberg, is out. In a statement Monday, Boeing said its board decided the change at the top was necessary to restore confidence in the company moving forward as it works to repair relationships with regulators, customers, and all other stakeholders. Boeing has been engulfed in crisis following 2 737 MAX crashes that killed more than 300 people and led to numerous investigations. The company recently decided to temporarily halt production of the grounded jet. And just days ago, Boeing's Starliner failed in its maiden attempt to dock with the International Space Station. Chairman David Calhoun has been named Boeing's new CEO effective in January. And the new non-executive chairman of the board, Lawrence Kellner, promised Monday, quote, marks a new way forward for our company. Axios is reporting on an email exchange that shows a top fundraiser for South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg offering a rich prospective donor access to the campaign in return for donations, an overture critics describe as a particularly blatant example of how big money corrupts the American political system. The Louisville Courier-Journal reported that the FBI is investigating lame duck Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin's parade of pardons. Yep, the outgoing governor pardoned or commuted the sentences of more than 600 criminals, many of them violent felons, after he was voted out of office. Among those who caught a break was Patrick Baker, who is 2 years into a 19-year homicide and robbery sentence and whose brother held a fundraiser for Bevin last year. Bevin has denied that the fundraiser or a letter from a mega donor had anything to do with his decision on Baker. Yeah, right. And finally, Donald Trump on Friday spoke at the Turning Point USA Student Action Conference in Florida, where he turned his knowledge of everything about everything onto the topic of wind power and turbines.
I never understood wind. I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody. I know it's very expensive. Tremendous fumes, gases. They're noisy. They kill the birds. You want to see a bird graveyard? You just go. Take a look. A bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday. You'll see more birds than you've ever seen ever in your life. But why is it okay for these windmills to destroy the bird population? And that's what they're doing.
So there's that. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler, host of The Nicole Sandler Show, based at NicoleSandler.com, wishing you and your family a very, very happy holiday season and best wishes for a Trump-free New Year.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder, Tuesday's Christmas Eve special. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of around 43 to 44. And it looks like that weather pattern will prevail for most of my trip up to Salem today. Looks like winds will be light and variable, and expecting locally some rain showers mixing with snow overnight. Overnight lows in the low 30s. Winds will remain light and variable locally. And then tomorrow looks like it will be partly to mostly cloudy with a high of about 47 to 48. Air pollen currently and locally is rated at none. The air quality index is at 40 parts per million, which is supposedly in the good range, though that daytime UV index is rated low at a wintertime 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.92 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 81%. Looks like in the Willamette Valley we might be getting some rain and a snow mix Christmas Day, though Thursday and Friday looks currently, though everything is subject to change with the weather, looks like I might have some good travel weather, and that would be nice. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to get somewhat of a stuffed up nose. Not now. Not now. London is 54 and partly cloudy. Paris is 54 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 55 and sunny. Kyiv is 43 and cloudy. Kabul is 36 with that ever-present smoke. Hong Kong is 63 and fair. Tokyo is 42 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 72 and mostly cloudy with also quite a bit of smoke. San Francisco, California is 44 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted, these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former senior executive at China's state-run Sinochem Group was sentenced to 11 and a half years in prison for taking bribes. Du Keiping, a vice president at the chemicals and oil firm until April of 2017, was found guilty of taking the equivalent of $1.8 million U.S. worth of bribes, according to a statement on the WeChat account of the Shandong High People's Court. Du was formerly head of Sinochem's fertilizer business and president of Sinochem Hong Kong Holdings Company, Ltd. A Sinochem Group spokesman declined to comment on the matter.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Gopal Sharma of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday's Christmas Eve special. Police in Nepal have detained 122 Chinese nationals in its biggest crackdown on crime by foreigners entering the country on tourist visas. The chief of police in the capital of Kathmandu said 122 Chinese men and women were rounded up in raids yesterday, Monday, following information that they were engaged in suspicious activities. The Chinese are suspected of carrying out cybercrime and hacking into bank cash machines, adding that the police chief adding that they were being held in different police stations and their passports and laptop computers had been seized. This is the first time that so many foreigners have been detained for suspected criminal activities, he said. Chinese embassy officials were not immediately available for comment, but another senior police officer said the embassy knew of the raids and had supported the detention of the suspects. Chinese nationals are regularly detained in Asian countries on suspicion of involvement in various illegal activities, often involving fraud back in China. In September, police arrested 5 Chinese nationals on a charge of stealing money by hacking into bank machines in the Philippines, and Chinese citizens were also arrested with smuggled gold this year. Nepal and China signed a treaty on mutual assistance in criminal matters during a visit to Nepal by Xi Jinping in October, and China has been increasing its investment in Nepal in recent years in areas such as roads, power plants, and hospitals. More than 134,000 Chinese tourists visited Nepal between January and October this year, up 9.2% from the same period in 2018. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and most likely the week. So we will be meeting up for River City Hash Mondays, if we don't happen to do Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, which is also a possibility. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all that regular and special holiday programming. And we'll meet up with you right here, either on Friday or Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.